Unit 7, Cellular Respiration. Cellular respiration is not the same thing as breathing. When we breathe, we take in oxygen and we give off carbon dioxide, and that gas exchange happens throughout our lungs. Cellular respiration is the breaking down of glucose, right here. And in the presence of oxygen, it will produce carbon dioxide, water, and 36 to 38 ATP. This occurs in the mitochondria. Cellular respiration occurs in plant cells, as well as animal cells, as well as algae, bacteria, and all those things. Breathing gives oxygen to our cells and removes the carbon dioxide. So it brings oxygen that we will need eventually for cellular respiration, and it removes that oxygen that is produced in cellular respiration. So there is a connection between breathing and cellular respiration, but they're not quite the same thing. So what is cellular respiration? Cellular respiration is the process by which mitochondria breaks down glucose to produce ATP, or this energy source right here. ATP is used to provide energy for the cells to do work. And the formula for cellular respiration should look pretty familiar to you. It's kind of the backwards formula to photosynthesis. So instead of producing glucose, glucose is a reactant and oxygen is a reactant. And those are the inputs. It produces 6 CO2, carbon dioxide, 6 H2O, water, and around 36 to 38 ATP, or energy. So these are the products, also known as the output. Of course, light is not needed for cellular respiration as it is in photosynthesis. The structure of the mitochondria, you should be able to draw this in your notes and label the cristae, which are the folds, the matrix, which is inside the folds or inside the mitochondria, the outer membrane, and the inner membrane. So there are two types of respiration that can take place, and it's really whether or not oxygen is present. If oxygen is present, it's known as aerobic, and that requires oxygen. The max ATP is 38. Now, not every individual on all conditions will make 38 ATP, but that's kind of the max amount. If there's no oxygen present, it's anaerobic. You know that term as well. And the max ATP it can make is only 2 ATP. So in both cases, respiration takes place. But in an anaerobic condition, we also have this fermentation that can take place, which is the production of alcohol or lactic acid. And we'll talk about that a lot more later on. So we're going to just talk specifically about cellular respiration. And again, the overview transfers chemical energy in food. So if I eat something and it turns it into a different type of chemical energy that our cells can use called ATP. So our cells can't really use this food chemical energy, but it can use ATP. So it just converts it from one chemical to another. The reactions proceed in the same way in plants and animals, and the process is called cellular respiration. The overall reaction is as follows. Again, we have glucose, 6 oxygen, and it yields 6 carbon dioxide, 6 water, and a maximum amount of 38 ATP. The breakdown of glucose actually occurs in the cytoplasm, so it does not occur in the mitochondria initially. And then, of course, we have the two respirations. We have anaerobic, which is without oxygen, and aerobic, which is with oxygen. So here's the actual reaction. A couple things to note. The first step, glycolysis, occurs in the cytoplasm, not actually in the mitochondria. This yellow thing right here is the mitochondria. And then we have the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. Let's talk about each one of those steps individually. So glycolysis. Please follow along with the diagram that I gave you in class as you kind of take notes on this so you can see a visual. But it's a series of reactions that breaks down 6-carbon glucose molecule into 2 3-carbon pyruvate molecules. So if I just kind of take a look at this, we have 6 carbons, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it breaks it down into 2 3-carbon molecules. This happens in the cytoplasm. It does not require oxygen, so it's anaerobic. It needs 2 ATP just to get it started. So it's kind of like putting in some fuel to get more fuel out of it. It actually produces 4 ATP, so it's a total yield of only 2 ATP because I require 2 for the input and it outputs 4, therefore I get a net of 2 ATP. It produces also 2 NADH molecules, which are also some fuel, and NADH is called a coenzyme. Coenzymes carry electrons from one enzyme to another to catalyze a different reaction. Remember, enzymes lower that activation energy and kickstart a reaction. Krebs cycle occurs in the matrix or inside space. It's not the membrane of the mitochondria. Oxygen is required. It's considered aerobic. It completes that breakdown of glucose. So it takes those 3-carbon pyruvates and it breaks it down even further. The carbon and the oxygen end up in carbon dioxide and water. So carbon dioxide is going to produce there. Hydrogen and electrons are stripped and loaded onto the NAD positive and FAD, and it makes NADH and FADH2. Remember, those are coenzymes, so it makes an additional, FADH2 is just another type of coenzyme. It's kind of that fuel or that jump kickstart that will start another reaction. So the hydrogen is stripped off and then adds to that NADH and FADH2. It produces only 2 ATPs, but it loads up these coenzymes with protons, H positive, and electrons, and so it's kind of like building up some fuel to move into the third stage. So it does produce 8 NADHs and 2 FADHs too. Basically, it's just kind of loading up for a big reaction to produce lots of energy. It's getting everything all ready to go to produce lots of energy in our next stage. All right, then it moves into electron transport chain. It occurs in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. Oxygen is required, so it is aerobic. Electron carriers that are loaded with electrons and protons, NADH and FADH2 from the Krebs cycle, move to this chain-like series of steps. It's called a staircase. As electrons drop down the stairs, energy is released each time to form a total of around 34, 36, I think 34 max ATP. Yeah, 34 max ATP. Oxygen waits at the bottom of the staircase and picks up electrons and protons, and so water forms through this process. So the total energy tally is, the maximum amount is 38 ATP for aerobic versus only 2 ATP for anaerobic. We'll get to anaerobic later. Glycolysis, you get 2. Krebs cycle, you can get 2. And electron transport chain, you can get a maximum of 34. Now, that's if everything's working correctly. This is a machine, and so that's kind of the max 34 ATP, but sometimes there might be a little bit less than that.